Good evening, everybody. It's John here from Tutor to You, welcoming you along to another of our live streams for A-Level Economics. Tonight we are concentrating on aggregate demand and aggregate supply. I hope you're well. Now, I don't know about you, but where I am, there's a gale blowing outside, and I think that may have contributed to one or two little technical gremlins that we're having tonight. Good evening to Penny if she's watching. Penny had difficulties tuning in because of issues around where she is based. So tonight it is myself, but I'm joined by Nikki. Good evening, Nikki. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much. How lovely to see everyone.
How lovely it is to see you. How lovely it is to see everybody. It's good to see lots of people have already joined us on the chat window. So if you've not been to one of these before, real quick idea of what we're going to do. We've got about 30 minutes or so of some fast-paced revision activities tonight. As I've said, we're concentrating on aggregate demand and aggregate supply. They're relatively quick, and what we love to see is as many responses as possible in the chat window. If you can keep the chat in the chat window to discussions about what we're discussing on screen with the questions, that would be very much appreciated. Just be aware again, because of the technical gremlins, there's about a 15-second delay between the live studio where myself and Nikki are located and the broadcast, so we might have to wait a few moments to see some of your responses coming in, but we would love to see them, so please do put some answers into the questions if you can. Now, we always have a PowerPoint that we use to deliver our questions on. That will be available to download as soon as this live stream is finished, so if you do want to go through any of the questions and answers again, you can do that. And this is being recorded. A good evening or hello to those of you who are watching this on replay. Of course, you can take as long as you would like with regards to the questions, and pause where you see necessary. I think I've done all the intros, Nikki. Shall we get started?
Let's get started. Fantastic. Right, we're going to dive straight in with some multiple choice questions, and we've got a nice, easy one to ease you into this evening's revision. So let's start with question 1. A government has announced an increase in expenditure on defence. Ceteris paribus. This will cause. So, what we want in the chat window is your answer to this multiple choice question. We're hoping to be able to get some soon, but as we say, we've got a little bit of a delay. So, I think there might be a bit of a delay before I can start reading out some of your answers. But Alfie's straight off the mark. He says A. So, we've got the government increasing its expenditure. Just a little reminder, Alfie's correcting himself. He's now put D. Remind ourselves, aggregate demand is made up of C plus I plus G plus X minus M. So the answer is, please, John. The answer is indeed, everybody's getting it now, D. Well done. That's better. AJ, Vex, well done. Kimberly, you've got it. Keris, well done indeed. Right, now we're going to go on to one a little bit more complicated. What effect would a rise in global levels of protectionism have on net trade for an economy? So global levels of protectionism are increasing. So that means that we have got an increase. We've got higher tariffs on imports. We've got more quotas, perhaps more domestic subsidies. What effect will that have on net trade? So net trade, of course, is the value of exports minus the value of imports. So we have got this little bit of a delay, but hopefully we'll be getting some answers through soon. What do we think a rise in global levels of protectionism might do? So the effects on net trade. Lots of answers C flying through. Kimberly, Pete, Sheila, Alfie, all saying C. So let's have a look at what you're saying. You're saying employment in import-related industries will fall. Well done. That is really good application. When we're reading essays, when we're reading your essays in the summer, we want to be reading about export-related or import-related industries. And you're right, we won't have quite so many imports, so therefore we won't need so many people in those related industries. Fantastic, flying start. Well done, everybody. Okay, question 3. The diagram below shows a shift in aggregate demand. So first thing to do is to check we're shifting left. Which of the following changes is most likely to cause this shift? So what are we going to have going on in our economy to shift our aggregate demand curve left? I'm seeing some of you putting answer C here, a rise in indirect taxes. I'm going to say then no, that's not quite right. If it was a rise in direct taxes, then C would be correct, but an indirect tax will affect the aggregate supply curve. So Pete is saying C. I've just explained why it isn't C. Amelia is saying A, a rise in the savings ratio. So a rise in the savings ratio means that more people will be saving, and if they're saving, they won't be able to consume as much, so consumption will fall. So AJ, you're spot on with answer A. Amelia, well done indeed. A rise in the savings ratio is absolutely correct. Let's have a look at question 4. Right, now if you're at all unsure, I hope you've got a scrap of paper in front of you. You can draw this. A movement along a short-run aggregate supply curve resulting in a higher level of real national output could have been caused by. So if you're at all unsure in a question like this, quick tip, you're in the exam, quickly sketch it. You've got a short-run aggregate supply curve, so 45 degrees, and we've got a movement along resulting in a higher level of real national output. So, of course, it has to move up. What could have caused that? So let's see if we can get some answers coming through. Let's see what you think might have caused that. What would it be? Rise in the exchange rate, fall in wages, higher general price level, or a rise in indirect taxes? Well, in the last question, I just told you a rise in indirect taxes would shift that short-run aggregate supply curve. So it can't be D. So Sheila's saying C, Alfie's saying C, Vex is saying C, AJ saying C. A higher general price level. You are spot on. Absolutely well done, all of you. A higher general price level. We don't know what's caused that. Obviously, it's been a shift in the demand curve. But all we're interested in this question is that movement along the short run aggregate supply curve. Fantastic. Well done, everybody. You're absolutely on the ball tonight. Right, let's have a look. Other things remaining the same. Question 5. A rise in the national living wage rate will result in. So if we've got a rise in the national living wage rate, used to be called the minimum wage, what will that do? So let's see if we've got some answers coming in. What do we think will happen? Is it going to affect the long run or the short run? Well, if it's a rise in the national living wage rate, that's going to affect costs of production. So hopefully you've all out there eliminated, well, if it's cost of production, it's got to be B or C. It can't be A or D. So Kathy is saying B. Which way is it going to shift if you raise the minimum wage? You're absolutely right, Kathy. You're right, Kimberly. We are going to have the short run aggregate supply curve moving to the left. The answer is actually B. It can't be A, because the national living wage rate would actually shift in the short run, not the long run. Okay, well done all those guys that have come in with B. You probably came in with that seconds and seconds ago, but I'm only getting the results now. Okay, I'm going to hand over to John.
Thanks, Nikki, and thank you to all of you who have taken part so far. Remember, we've got that little bit of delay, so there's a little bit of delay before we see your responses, and we're moving on to an activity now which requires a little bit more than just one letter as an answer. It's probably going to require you to put some sentences or some abbreviations in. So we're using this activity called Connection Spinner, and the idea is to try and connect what's in the centre of our screen with any one of the items around it. So the questions, if you like, are very similar to the multi-choice questions, but now we're opening up a little bit more and getting you to think about what your responses would be. So just as you may not always get a multi-choice question, you might have to explain a little bit more in a longer format. That's what we're hoping to do tonight. Now, we've got a random spinner on screen, so I don't know which of the 6 item is going to land upon. But the question is this: what is the likely impact on real national output and the price level from? So you've got to imagine your aggregate demand, your aggregate supply diagram. You've got to imagine where the equilibrium are and how they would change depending on what we apply. So let's run this random spinner. Let's see what happens and where it lands upon. And I will then love to see your responses. Okay, there it is. More government spending on infrastructure. So you're going to need to write me up as quick a sentence as you possibly can. It's always going to be a little bit more tricky when we require people to write slightly longer responses. But have a think about that. So think about your aggregate demand, your aggregate supply diagram. You've got them on screen. You've drawn them out. Your question talks about more government spending on infrastructure. What's that likely to shift or move? Where's there likely to be a movement? What's likely to be the final outcome where our diagram goes from point A equilibrium wise to point B? Where's that point B? What has happened to output and what has happened to price levels? We are getting some answers in. Thank you. Me Gamer has gone with price level increases, national income increases. Thank you. Alfie's gone with price level increases, as does the real national output. Brilliant. I'm not going to give any clues at the moment as to whether I think that they're correct. Let's allow 1 or 2 people to come in. Short run increase in GDP, says Kathy. showed an increase in GDP and price level. Long run increase both is stable. Now, when we give our response in a moment or two, Kathy, I won't differentiate at this point between long run and short run too great. So, but thank you for that. That's a more detailed response. Shalea's gone with government capital spending on infrastructure such as National Railway was likely to shift the long run aggregate supply curve out, increasing national output. Thank you. And what happens to the price level, Shalea? That'd be interesting to know as now. Long run government infrastructure projects. Now, just while I'm allowing one or two more people to come in, it's an important point to make this one. Long run infrastructure projects that the government might be implementing. Big student, a popular student response when we talk about UK government infrastructure projects is, of course, HS2. Now, the fact that HS2 has changed in terms of its final destination, that won't have been known by your examiners. Remember that your exam would have been written well over 12 months ago, so they wouldn't have known about government changes, just in case that arrives in your exam where they're still talking about it going all the way to Manchester. You'll be able to talk about the impact of HS2 only going as far as Birmingham. Let's see if we've got any more. Kimberly, thank you. The aggregate demand will shift right, and so price level. Well done to everybody who's gone with that. Let's have a quick look at what we've got. You've done very well there. Yes, aggregate demand will shift to the right when we see more government spending. When the government spends on anything, more people will be employed, more people will be earning, and therefore we should see a shift in our aggregate demand. Government is a big employer, of course, and our aggregate demand will shift both in the short and the long run. Well done. Let's try that one more time. Let's see, where do we land our second time? Let's have a look and see what your response is this time. Same question. What is the likely impact on real national output and price level? Where is it landing this time? This time we have got an increase in indirect taxation. Now, the good news for you guys tonight is Nikki's already mentioned this a couple of times at least when we were going through the multi-choice question. So hopefully this one is if you didn't know before, hopefully you're a little bit more aware of where we are. So have a go at this one. Let's see what your responses are. Again, I'll wait for a few moments while you're thinking about this. You're shifting either mentally or on a piece of paper your aggregate demand and your aggregate supply curves. This time we're talking about an increase in indirect taxation, and Nikki was pointing out before to be really careful of this difference between indirect and direct taxation and which of the two curves, aggregate demand and aggregate supply, it would impact upon. Kathy saying slower growth, higher price level. Thank you, Kathy. Alfie, price level increases, real national output decrease. Thank you, Alfie. We'll come to a response to that in a second. Increase in indirect taxation will decrease short-run aggregate supply, so reduce real output and increase the price. We know that an indirect tax is a tax on a product, and as such, it should be impacting very quickly on our aggregate supply curve. Thank you, Me Gamers, coming with another response there. Let's put our answer up on the screen. This time, aggregate demand doesn't shift. We know there's going to be a different level of aggregate demand and price levels will change, but actually there's no shift in the aggregate demand curve. We have got a shift with our aggregate supply curve, though, which will lead to an increase in general price levels and also a fall in national output. Brilliant responses there from everybody. Thank you so much for that. I'll hand you back over to Nikki.
Right, now we're going to play the bubble quiz. I love the bubble quiz. So remember that it's a little bit like we're going to have a question, but a little bit like multiple choice. But the number of answers can be none, 1, 2, 3, or all 4. So let's kick off with the first one. Which of these would cause an increase in net exports from an economy? So we're looking for which of these bubbles will cause more exports from an economy. So I need you to have a think through which ones are going to do. Now, some of you might remember something called Whippy Deck. You might have used that in your teaching, which is weak pound imports cheap, exports dear, or spiced is the opposite of that. So have a think about that with A. Pete's going for A, B, and D. So he's going for weaker currency. If you've got a weaker currency, then of course your exports seem cheaper, so you will increase your exports. So A looks good. Production of desirable exports. Well, that sounds pretty sensible, doesn't it? If you've got desirable exports, you could export more. So A and B are safe bets. What about C? And what about D? Well, D, if you know your international economics, you know that you're going to have more trade, more exports. So A, B, and D. It's that C that's the problem. Now, actually, you're all on the ball here because you're all saying A, B, and D, but not C. And you are spot on. Look at that. A, B, and D all cause more exports from an economy. Fabulous. Well done indeed. That was really fast. I think you guys are getting much faster. Which of the following would be considered supply side shock? Now, a supply side shock is not just something really small, it will affect almost every industry in the economy. It has to be big and it has to be pretty unexpected. So let's have a look at some of your answers. What would cause a supply side shock? Would it be a natural disaster causing a fall in production? That sounds about right, doesn't it? Economic downturn in a major trading partner, unexpected cut to welfare benefits, or a steep rise in oil prices. So Emin is saying A, B, and D. Pete is saying just A and D. Maisha is saying just D. Shelley is saying A, B, and D. Alfie, A, B, and D. We've got a lot of A, B, and Ds again. Okay, let's have a look. Me Gamer, A, B, and D as well. It's not B, and let me explain why. A is pretty self-evident. B, a major downturn, would cause a demand side shock because that trading partner will not be buying your exports, and that would cause a demand side shock. So just be a little bit careful there. Okay, steep rise in oil prices. The clues in the question, it's steep, perhaps unexpected, like we saw 18 months ago, 2 years ago. The expected cuts to welfare benefits is more of an internal effect, and actually that you could suggest that that would increase the supply of labour, because if people are no longer getting welfare benefits, they might supply themselves to the labour market. So actually that could have the opposite effect. Well done, well thought through. Great question. Let's have a look at number 3. Which of these would be considered effects of improved productivity in an economy? So as I say to my students, RTFQ, read the full question. Which of these would be considered effects? So after the effect, not causes of improved productivity. So we're looking for which of these would be a consequence of improved productivity. So what do we think? So Fatima's saying A and D. Are we still? It's a little bit difficult to know whether you're talking about the new one or the last one. So we're looking at which of these would be effects of improved productivity. Let's have a look and see what we've got coming through. So we've got quite a few answers for B. Yes, improved balance of trade. If you've got better improved productivity, your costs of production are likely to go down, so your export prices are likely to go down. So yes, you're likely to export more and probably import less because your domestically produced products might be a bit more competitive. So B's a very safe bet. Kathy is saying also D, a fall in general price levels. You're absolutely right, because of the same reason. If you've got improved productivity, costs of production go down, you're more efficient, and hopefully producers will pass on those costs in the form of lower prices. Keris is saying A as well, an increase in business investment. Keris, you are spot on. The same with Maisha. You're spot on. Because we've got improved productivity, then businesses think, well, it's now worth investing. So that does, although it's both a cause of improved productivity, it is also an effect of improved productivity. So that was the tricky one. Well done indeed. And lastly, C, a reduction in state spending, because of course, hopefully we won't be spending quite so much on subsidies, but also on perhaps benefits and so forth, because more people will be in work. Well done. That was a really good question. Excellent effort, everyone.
Those answers are still coming in, Nikki. That's fantastic to see, isn't it? So
It
we've got
is.
two activities left to go. This first one, a new one for us. What should go under the umbrella? Nice little rain effect on our screen tonight. Very appropriate given the weather outside of my room right at the moment, I should say. Okay, very straightforward task, this one. What we've been trying to do all night is try and get you to think about what impacts upon aggregate demand, what impacts upon aggregate supply, what impacts on them both. This one is very much concentrating, this question is very much concentrating on saying to yourself, right, what is the impact on short run aggregate supply compared to long run aggregate supply. So what I would like you to do, I'm going to give you a time in a second, but feel free to start as soon as you would like. I want a list of all those numbers from 1 to 8 that you think would cause a shift in the short run aggregate supply. So you don't need to wait till you've got all of them. Start typing them in as soon as you would like. I'm going to put a little timer on the screen. I've got my timer is going. I'll get my timer going. I will get my timer going. Let's put it on screen. Here we go. Timer is going. So just a list of numbers, please. Pete came in very quickly. Thank you, Pete. And by shifting across the numbers rather than letters, I can tell that Pete has responded to this question. Thank you very much for that. Pete has given me, I think, 6 out of the 8 there, which is nice to see. Let's see if anybody else can come in. Don't need to wait to work out them all. Type them in as soon as you spot one that you think is causing a shift in short run aggregate supply. Thank you to Eman, who has also put their response in. That's wonderful. Alfie as well. Wonderful stuff. Let's allow you to have a few more moments to think of your responses. Thank you, Alfie. Thank you, Amelia. Yes, Amelia has gone with 1, 3, 5, 6 and 7. As has Kimberly. 1, 3, 5, 6 and 7. Wonderful stuff. Brilliant. Okay, so you're going to carry on putting your responses in. Let me put the answers up on screen for you all so that you can be absolutely clear. In this case, it's possibly a little bit easier to talk about the 3 that aren't coming underneath our under our umbrella. So the 3 responses at the top, 4, 8 and 2, are those which we would say are more likely to impact upon a long run aggregate supply. So if we think that ultimately what's causing a quick shift, as it were, in our short run aggregate supply, it's generally to do with changes in prices, changes in cost of production, sudden changes in business confidence could cause that as well. And so the 5 that we've got listed there: general rise in wages, an increase in environmental taxes, which would be pretty instant, an increase in costs caused by meeting regulations. So by the way, it's always useful if you're putting that as a suggestion to have an example of a cost that might have been caused by a regulation, a decrease in energy prices, fall in cost of imported goods. Whilst 4, 8 and 2, we're saying that they apply to the long run. They're more likely to shift our aggregate supply in the long run. Particularly that example of advances in use of technology. That's the student favourite for explaining long run aggregate supply shifts. And of course, the big example at the moment we'd like to talk about there is AI and the impact. Assuming AI doesn't lead to the end of the world, which I'm confident it won't do, it should lead to massive improvement. There was a report out last week that's saying in developed economies like the UK, AI is likely to impact on as much as 50% of the jobs. So many of the jobs that you're likely to go into after you finish university or when you go finish your A-levels are likely to be impacted by the use of AI. And the report's not saying that that's a negative thing necessarily. Obviously, employers will have to change the way that they train people and use people. But AI is going to have a significant impact upon cost of production and change of production in the long run. Okay, brilliant stuff. I am going to hand back over to Nikki for the final activity.
Right, on this one, you'll recognise this. On balance, we're going to give you a question here, and then we're going to ask for an advantage and a disadvantage for an economy with no output gap. Given the delay on your comments, let's start with one advantage, and then afterwards I will ask for a disadvantage. So we want an advantage of an economy with no output gap. So what does that mean? That means that actual output is exactly the same as the productive potential of the economy. So, in other words, if you were to draw this, you would have an economy actually on its PPF or on its PPC. So already I'm getting some answers in. Emin says price stability. Okay, that's a good one, but I would, in an exam, of course, you would need to explain why that was happening. Me Gamer says low levels of unemployment. You are spot on with that one. And technically, there would be zero unemployment of any resources, but that would be technically. What else have we got? Pete is saying there's less unused capacity, so less risk of deflation. You are right, Pete. Well done. But also less risk of deflation. You're right. Possibly no. Lots of people are saying price stability, so no pressure of inflation. Kathy, no unemployment, no wasted unused resources, increased economic confidence coming in from Alfie. Keris, this means all factors of production being used and there is no unemployed resources. Well done. You're right, Keris, because there is no unemployed resources. So yes, labour, but also land and capital and enterprise. Okay, let's have a look and see what the advantages are. We've got John. We've got very few, because in reality, we've said very few of the economy's resources are being unused. So in reality, you cannot have all your resources perfectly used. It just wouldn't work. But if you'd said that in your answer, we as examiners, of course, yes, that's absolutely fine. That is technically correct. But also, so is this. Very few of the economy's resources being unused. Real national output would be as high as it could be for that economy. It would be at a high level for that economy. There would be no unemployed resources, no spare capacity. So we've seen those as advantages. Let's see, we've got Pete's coming in with a disadvantage. You must have a super fast broadband connection, Pete, because you're getting in really fast with your answers. Disadvantage, no spare capacity, so less flexibility in catering for a boom in demand. You are right. If there is some kind of rise in demand, that will then end up with demand pull inflation, and that will capsize all that price stability that you're all giving me as an advantage. Yes, you are right. Let's see what else have we got. Kathy, significant risk of high inflation if they're positive output gap. Yes, and Kathy, what I'd like to see in that answer is what sort of inflation, what's the cause? Would it be cost push or demand pull? And you could argue either cost push because all your resources are already being used. So there is no spare resources around. Amelia could highlight low levels of competitiveness and the economy may not be reaching its productive potential. Let's have a look at that answer in a bit more detail. The economy might not be reaching its productive potential, but if you have no output gap, then you are on your productive potential. You are reaching your productive potential. Amelia, you're not reaching your productive potential if you have a negative output gap. Okay. Yes, Kathy, you're right. Following that up, that's beautiful. And you've just improved the quality of your answer no end by doing that. Let's have a look. John, what have we got as possible? So there's a high risk of inflation because there's a shortage of scarce resources. So reading that would be nice in your answers to see a high risk of cost push inflation as there is a shortage of scarce resources to increase output further. Now, this answer cleverly has put a little bit of microeconomics, a risk of diseconomies of scale if firms are producing beyond their minimum efficient scale. So we're assuming that if there is no output gap, firms are operating at a high capacity themselves, producing beyond their minimum efficient scale. The reason we put this one in there is because at this stage of the game, we're not a million miles from your A level. You need to start thinking about, is there a micro answer to this as well as a macro answer? Because you've got to start thinking about that paper 3. Okay. Ellie, you've come in at the last minute. Workers will be overworked. Efficiency. Oh, look at that. What a star answer. Ellie, brilliant. Thank you.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you, Nikki, and thank you to everybody who's contributed tonight. I'm going to read out a list of names. Forgive me if I couldn't write your name down in time. Alfie, AJ, Kathy, Keris, Fed, Me Gamer, Pete, Kimberly, Shalia, Raphael, Amelia, Iman, Maisha, Fatima, Harry, Greta, Ellie. If I've missed your name out, I massively apologise. Thank you so much for participating. Some wonderful answers. Nikki, I thought some of those responses right at the end to a difficult question that requires a balanced answer. I thought they were absolutely outstanding.
Absolutely.
I hope you've found tonight useful. If you have, please do give us a thumbs up in YouTube. That helps get our message out there to a wider audience. Don't forget the things I said before we started tonight. PowerPoint will be available in a few seconds' time. This has been recorded so you can rewatch again. And of course, we're back on next Tuesday. We're back on talking about labour economics. So it would be wonderful to see you all then as well. It'd be great to see you if we can. Thank you, Nikki. Thanks for your contribution tonight. It's been really useful.
Thank you, everyone. It's been lovely to see you all.
Goodbye, everybody.